Derya, thank you for joining me on this fine Thursday afternoon. At least it's afternoon for me. I'm not sure what part of the world you find yourself in right now.
Yeah, I'm currently traveling right now, so I'm in Vancouver, Canada. And thank you for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure.
I can't remember if it was TikTok or Instagram when I first came across your content, but have since dived into a bunch of it, including some YouTube stuff. You're an impressive woman for a variety of reasons. Before we get too far into sort of what you're up to these days, which is also incredibly exciting and very interesting to me in particular, I'd love if we could set the stage for folks listening, sort of, who are you? Where do you come from? How did you end up in this very, we'll call it non-traditional location, healing people? What's your background?
Beautiful question. Thank you. Yes. So my name is Derya. I am indigenous Kurdish. That is my heritage. That is my ancestry. And I was born in Eastern Kurdistan, which is also known as Northwest Iran. I moved when I was a very, very small child. I grew up in Vancouver, Canada, and about 2 years ago, I moved to Costa Rica. So Costa Rica is my home. And yeah, my journey began at a very young age, I would say. I remember the first time I had this inkling that there was some system that was oppressing us, or something was just not right. Like something didn't make sense to me. I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and I was sitting in a classroom and I'm just looking around. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. And so I feel like intuitively my soul has we have our soul contracts that I believe, and I feel it's been this contract for me to go on to this path. And I've had to have many hardships and many challenges in order for me to wake up to that calling, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's pretty much just like a little bit about me. I'm just, I'm pretty much like a normal person. There's nothing much. When I think about talking about myself, I'm like, yeah, I'm just like living my life as a human like everyone else. I know my journey is probably pretty unique to everybody else's, but yeah, I love to travel and I love people. I love community. And that's always been my thing as well, ever since I was a young teenager. And when I first hit depression at 13 years old, and that was, I would say, like my first dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul is what triggers most people's awakening usually. So that was about 13, 14, and I had to go through such deep traumatic events and times with myself and my family to get to this place where I didn't want to live like that anymore. I had just so much self-hatred, so much hatred for the world that it took years. It took a few years for sure until, finally, even just like a couple years ago, where I was like, I'm completely done with this suffering mentality that I have attached myself to my entire life. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. The 13, 14-year-old dark night of the soul period, was that standard teenaged angst, girlfriend, boyfriend, breakups type of stuff? Parents are oppressing me. Or was it like, some people have varying degrees of trauma that happened to them. The worst thing that ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you, right? And we're all relative creatures.
Absolutely.
So I never want to downplay anybody's anything.
Right.
But just curious, what was that experience that drove you so deep?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And, I can laugh at that response or that inquiry in that way because, if it was me years ago, I'd be like, what do you mean? But I get it because I grew up very privileged. I grew up in Canada. I grew up with a beautiful life. My immigrant parents being like, what's wrong with you? Why are you not happy? Like, you have everything, literally everything. And this was the root of it. It's like I understand the root of depression so well, and I've understood it since the first day I experienced it. I'm like, it is not about my external reality. Yes, it plays a part in it, but it's so deep. And for me, I feel like it's very ancestral. For me personally, it's always been very ancestral. This is not something I was born with, so to speak, or it's just been passed down. It's been passed down in my lineage, this suffering and this fear, and especially being an immigrant, there's a lot of generational trauma that comes with it. But the events externally, when you looked at it, it was like, for me, it was the biggest heartbreak of my life. And it was a best friend that I had, like someone who was a sister to me. And that was what triggered it. It wasn't because of that I became depressed. It was what triggered this darkness that was in me, that has been in me like time and time again in my past lives or whatever reincarnation, my ancestors' traumas. So it was an opportunity for it to come to surface so that I could be the one to heal it in my lineage. And this is the gift I've been given. And sometimes that gift can look very challenging, very traumatic, very dark. And when I think about my childhood, my younger years, I remember I was seeing this one emotional therapist. I don't remember exactly what he was doing, but it was all intuitive, and he would just like, da, 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 da. He knew nothing about me, but he would just list off everything from my childhood. And it was 4 years old, depression, anxiety, 5, suicidal ideation, all these things. He was listing it off, all these ages. And I don't remember anything about my childhood. So this was what's really interesting to me. I know that obviously my parents coming to Canada, being young and being, brand new to this country, they had, a lot of challenges and struggles. And being the firstborn daughter, I get all the projected stuff from them. So I know there's a lot that happened in my childhood. And when I was in a medicine ceremony once, grandmother Aya, she told me very clearly too. She's like, you don't have to remember your childhood trauma. And I'm like, cool. Okay. I'm good. So yeah.
That's first of all, that's very healing to hear for anybody who's worried about, do I have to go back and truly relive all of my traumas to heal them? I think knowing that that's not a requirement to let it go, although it is one way of refeeling it and letting it vibrate through you. You can also just let it go. Absolutely. Exactly. Takes a little practice or some help from some other plants. So in your teenage years, you're going through this rough spot. Obviously you didn't kill yourself. Thank you for not doing that. So you can let us know. I tried. It didn't work. How did you come out of that? And what did you do after high school? Yeah, my suicidal ideation started from 13, and I had moments of it in my later years as well, but it was very strong 13, 14, 15. And then after that, I started seeing a therapist at 15. And after my parents sent me to so many psychologists, psychiatrists, tried to put me on medication, many things went down, and nothing ever worked. Nobody I ever saw I ever resonated with. And then I met this one therapist at 15, and she was perfect for me at the time. She was such an angel. I loved working with her. I worked with her for about 8 months, consistently once a week. And then after that, I felt like I was content. Like, I'm okay. I'm good. I have enough stability in my nervous system to continue my life and not be so angry and so depressed all the time, walking around with just like a very heavy cloud. And so after that point, I started being involved in my community. I started volunteering at these self-development seminars, and that also became a really big part of my world for 8 years. I was volunteering in this company, and it allowed me to just meet new people and allowed me to get into really this world of self-healing. And this was really the first time for me getting into this arena, and it had spirituality components in it as well. So it was very spiritual as well. So that's where my journey really began around 15. And and I was so ready to finish school. I never liked high school, so I was very ready to graduate high school. I was so close to dropping out, and I didn't. I graduated high school. Oh God, what was I doing? There's so many things. I've always been a creative. So since I started my first YouTube channel at 15, and
ever
Wow.
since then, I was like, this is all I'm going to do with my life. I'm never going to work a 9 to 5. I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to be a creator. I'm going to make videos, and that's it. I was like, I'm going to be a YouTuber. And I was very committed. I would envision it. I would have vision boards. I've been manifesting. I've been doing all this stuff for years. And I was very clear. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to work for someone. There's no way I want to go to college or university. And obviously my parents were not happy with that. And so yeah, my path after high school, it was so many different things I was exploring. I was still making YouTube videos. I was still involved with self-development seminars. I was volunteering, like I said, at all these retreats and courses. So I knew this was where my life was taking me. And I was just kind of in this flow and just figuring it out. I was still like, something's not clicking because I wasn't bringing in the abundance that I wanted to have a successful business. And eventually, I think I was 19 or 20, I found this holistic counseling school. And I was like, this is interesting. Okay. I never wanted to be a counselor. It's not like the idea of that didn't resonate with me. It was more so maybe guidance and intuitive coaching, that kind of stuff. But it had a coaching and counseling program. So I was like, okay, it's 2 years. Let's just do it. I felt that was my path at that time. So I did it, and it was a really beautiful experience. I learned many things. I learned what I didn't want to do in my sessions with people, and I learned what did work. And yeah, my life just kept going again, on and on after that, and eventually to Costa Rica.
So what was your family's relationship with religion and spirituality? Because I imagine that that's probably a non-trivial part of this story.
So this is actually the most interesting part, is my mom started her spiritual path before I did. So she was actually the one encouraging me to like go to these seminars. That's the part I missed out. She was the one, she bribed me to go to these seminars. That's the funniest part of the story. My dad is non-religious. So my parents, they both raised me non-religious, which I'm really grateful for because it allowed me to be very open in my beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Although I remember being a small child and they're like, if anyone asks if you believe in God, you say no. And I remember there was this part of me that's like, I wish I had a belief system. I wish I had something that I could believe in because it was all like science-based and it has to be fact and reality. So I grew up very masculine oriented. I grew up very like the fact, logic only, nothing else, nothing else that's spiritual. And then at one point, I don't even remember how or where this happened. I think it was when my depression began, my mom began this spiritual path, I think, to understand like what's going on and how can I be better for my daughter. So she began her spiritual journey just a couple of years before I did. And she was the one encouraging me and sending me like Tony Robbins videos all the time and all these like positive affirmations. And I'm like, stop. I'm like, I don't want to see it. I'm like, I don't believe in any of this. I'm like, this is all crap. Like, are you kidding me? Like, no, like suffering is real. And so, yeah, and it's really beautiful. So now me and my mom, we have a really beautiful relationship where I encourage her to be healthier now, which is so funny because she was always such a healthy, like she's probably one of the healthiest people I know. But yet now it's like,
and you just did a ceremony together fairly recently. If your TikTok is a timeline.
Yes, yeah, we did a combo ceremony, yes, with the frog medicine. Yeah, and that was really beautiful. She had a really amazing experience.
So that's probably a good segue into the type of stuff that you're doing these days, helping people heal with retreats and ceremonies. Why don't you just give a little overview of what your current vocation is? Yeah.
So for a whole year now, that's wild. I started my retreat business 1 year ago. I've been holding personal healing retreats and mentorships for souls, for people who feel called to just journey within themselves. It's such a personal experience to each of my guests who arrive. So everyone experiences such a vast variety of different types of healing. A lot of the women that I work with, it's a lot of womb healing that we really focus on. The men as well. When I work with men, I feel like it's a lot of inner child stuff that comes up. And yeah, and it's been in Costa Rica for the past year. I'm expanding it now where I get to do retreats in Vancouver and do retreats
Oh,
throughout
nice.
Canada and throughout Europe. And just, I want it to be an international thing. But for the past year, it's been in Costa Rica, and I'm continuing in Costa Rica as well. And there's just something about that land itself, being in the nature, being so immersed in the jungle. It's the most biodiverse country in the world. So the spirits are very present. So as soon as you step foot into Costa Rica, it's immediate healing. It's immediate sense of relaxation in your nervous system. You feel it. You're like,
Mm.
wow. It's a sense of being home. And that's what I felt when I first moved to Costa Rica. I had never even been there. And it was just like, you're moving. And I'm like, okay, I've never done something so spontaneous in my life. I've never moved
Wow.
countries before. And that was it. And I never looked back. So yeah, the healing retreats, they're beautiful opportunities. And it's such a go with the flow type of retreat as well, where it's not like other retreats where I have a set schedule. I have activities and exercises and ceremonies lined up if it ever feels like, okay, this is a time right now. But it's
More
very
intuitive.
much, yeah, it's very much intuitive, so that at any moment, if someone needs something or wants some one-on-one time, or they request a ceremony from me, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Or sometimes they even want to hold their own ceremonies. I just had a 3-month mentorship graduation in the past couple months. I think it was a month ago or 2 months ago they graduated. And that was one of my favorite experiences to hold for people, because they got so close, my guests, my mentees together. They were so close. They were doing their own ceremonies every single day. I'm like, I didn't even have to do anything. I'm just here. So it was, and that's the truest, that's the greatest thing for a teacher, for a mentor to see, is your students really take on the work and they take the lead for themselves, because that's my role, is to empower my guests, to empower my students to be their own self-healers more than anything. So I give you the tools and I say, I'm just here, and you do your work. You know, I don't heal people. Nobody heals people. You have to heal yourself. So yeah, and lots of plant medicine. I forgot to mention that. Lots of plant medicine. They're amazing tools.
You had mentioned earlier on that you discovered at some point that your depression was like unlocking a dam of ancestral stuff that's been following you. There's quite a bit of Western research that's coming about. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, on epigenetics, basically demonstrating that it's very real that we've demonstrated it, proof positive, that what happens to a mom, they pass that on through DNA to their children. And it doesn't take a lot to extrapolate that if you do that enough times, and you come from a place where, you know, whether it's severe famine or poverty or just oppression, war, insert the many things that basically pervaded human existence prior to modern times, and depending on where you live still, that gets programmed into your body, literally. Then there's even deeper ways of looking at that. Well, arguably deeper, different ways of looking, more Eastern ways of looking at it, that say you've got a soul that recycles back through this karmic wheel onto the planet, carrying with it the history of everything you weren't yet able to grow through. Which of those things do you align towards, including both or neither? And which did you come to first, and how did you go about, because you don't really just wake up one day and figure that out. Like, you got to kind of be presented with some evidence. And so how did that come about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I believe it was when I was in my counseling program at school, and I remember we just began speaking about, I don't know if it was like family lineage. It wasn't specifically ancestry. Maybe it was epigenetics that was being talked about, something like that. But it was really actually really simple. It was just talking about your own lineage, like talking about your mother's trauma, your grandmother's trauma. It was probably epigenetics we were talking about, because we did cover generational trauma. And that's when I started to examine for the first time. I was like thinking about what my grandmother went through, what my great grandmother went through. And I was like, wow, this is literally all in my DNA, all in my cells. And so that was the first time it opened that door for me. It was in my counseling program. And I remember it took me down this really beautiful path where I started to question my history of my ancestry, because I didn't know anything about my ancestry. I don't know anything about my heritage and its history. And there was a lot there. And that really opened the door for me. And I could feel every bone in my body, every cell in my body, like activating and opening. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is where this is all from. This makes so much sense. And I believe, and I don't actually, it may have been just before the counseling program or maybe during, because I just remember this. I remember I was seeing that same therapist that I saw when I was 15. I would see her once in a while. We're really good friends now. And I remember it was like, it still kept coming up, like the same feeling that I have. I'm like, why am I not happy? Like, I'm still not at peace. I don't get it. I'm like 19, 20 years old. And she was actually the one who said, maybe this is ancestral. You should go see this therapist. She gave me another number and she's like, try this person and see if you can do some like intuitive energy healing. And I was like, okay. And I didn't really know anything about energy healing at that point and ancestral healing. So it was either or that was first. But I believe in both that you said, that you mentioned, the epigenetics and the spiritual component of it, the soul.
A question about, I don't know why this is coming up, but you mentioned that your parents weren't religious.
Mm-hmm.
Is it common in Iran to not be religious?
No, not at all.
So that seems interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah, I grew up in a very interesting family. I grew up in a very non-average Middle Eastern family. Like most Middle Eastern families, you know, are religious or they have a lot of tradition. So there's some parts of that where like, I wish I had a little bit more tradition, ritual and spiritual component to it, but it's, you know, it was super divine. I'm so grateful for my parents. It's the reason I'm here. Yeah. So my parents, they grew up in Iran, an Islamic country. You are forced to learn Islam. You are forced to say that you're Muslim. And growing up there, they rejected it completely. They're like, absolutely. Like whenever we move out of Iran, we're not Muslim. We're not going to practice this. And yeah, that was just kind of it. They just rejected all of it. Were
they first generation rejectors?
Yes. Yeah, they are. Yes, they are. They are like the black sheep of their own families. My mom is the youngest in her family. My dad is the youngest in his family.
That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, it really does. Absolutely.
Do you think that they regret any of that? Have they ever talked about it with you?
I don't think so. No, they're not religious at all. They don't have any. My dad has no interest in any spirituality or any God concept at all. He's very like just science, like basic, really basic. My mom.
Where have you landed on the God concept?
I believe we are God. I believe we are all pieces and fractals of God. So absolutely, I love speaking of God now because I know I am it. And God itself, the word itself, you know, every word, every letter has a frequency. The word God is the highest frequency of a word we could ever speak. So, yeah.
It's fascinating concept and really hard to wrap your head around. It was mushrooms that convinced me that it was true.
Yes.
And I was in the shower after, I don't know, it was probably 3 or 4 hours into it. And I just started laughing because it suddenly became so preposterous to me, because you live this life trapped in the matrix and you're under this delusion that you're separate in some way. Mm-hmm. And what I was laughing about was the hilarity of hiding something from God. It's just like... It'd be like your hand hiding something from your arm.
Yeah.
Like how? It's not possible.
I love that.
Integral to the whole part. And then as soon as you realize that and you just think, wait a second, all of the molecules on this planet created everything that's on it. So of course I am part of Earth. Of course I am. And so of course Earth is part of the Milky Way. And of course the Milky Way is part of everything else. And something has to be superordinate to that. And so whatever that is God. Call it whatever you want. Mm-hmm. But I don't see, even, you know, for someone like your father, which is exactly how I was until a few years ago when I had sort of a blast off spiritual awakening, even at the scientific level, it's kind of irrefutable. It's like, of course, there's something that contains the whole. And whatever that thing is, we're a part of it. It's an inescapable fact. Now, what you do with that information is an interesting question. I've been fighting with freaking out about it because I went on a psychotic expedition. It's not really psychotic, but in retrospect, probably wasn't the smartest choice. Expedition to destroy my ego. And I didn't listen to enough Ram Dass before I went on that journey. You have to become somebody before you can become nobody. And I hadn't finished becoming somebody. And so my ego was like, it came roaring up out of the depths. Like, oh, you think you're going to get rid of me? Well, now I'm going to make you worry about everything all the time. It's just like, no. I went from feeling so unbelievably light and free and just like I was in flow state all the time to I went and reverted back way worse than it had ever been even before. And I think that's one of the funny things about these spiritual journeys is, you know, from the outside, if you're just learning about it, it can be like, oh, this is so cool. And everybody's like wizards and witches and you have magical powers and, and you're so peaceful all the time. It's like, well, not quite. You find peace, and that's something I never had. I never had peace before, but I had plenty of highs, and I was great at running from the lows, but the peace was never there. And I think that's something that people conflate with healing is that, oh, I'm never going to feel low anymore. I'm never going to feel sad or all those things. Like, no, you're going to feel it more, actually.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to feel it profoundly. It's going to vibrate through your whole body and bring you to your knees. But if you can pay attention, you'll see the beauty in it. And now you're living this full human experience as opposed to on a tiptoe sprint away from your shadow, which will eventually take you down and beat the living shit out of you in an alley.
Yes. Beautifully said.
A little side story on me.
I love that. I love the way you put that. Yeah. It's just spot on. I am yet to meet Mother Aya or Grandmother Aya. For those who are psychedelically curious, or I have a lot of friends actually who are actively considering ceremonies, whether they be with folks in the States who are doing things under the guise of, you know, religious ceremonies, or traveling to Costa Rica, Peru, places like that. Can you describe a little bit about the process for folks? Both the preparation, the mindset, the ideas around fasting and other, you know, mother plants, the shamans, Ikaros, like what's the whole set and setting? Yeah. So every ayahuasca ceremony is different depending on who you work with. So if you work traditionally with like the Shipibo tribes, they will have their own format. I have yet to sit in a very traditional ceremony. I work with somebody in Costa Rica who's been doing it for over 10 years. He trained in Peru with the Shipibo tribes. He has so much experience. So he's like, we're good friends. I work with him. He holds ceremonies for my guests in Costa Rica. I definitely would love to go to Peru and experience it there as well. I'm sure it's going to be a whole different experience. But the way that we do it, the way that we prepare, you know, there's the dieta. So the dieta is to really clean out your vessel, to take out things that doesn't resonate with the chemistry of ayahuasca, because ayahuasca, and we like to say that she's a very selfish medicine. So we even say like no mushrooms, no working with other psychedelics, no working with cannabis for at least a week. And if you can go longer, even better. If you can really commit to at least 2 weeks of the dieta and being with yourself. But the most important is 3 to 5 days before. So clean diet. And this also means everything you're consuming. So I would say no screen time. Don't be scrolling and mindlessly consuming all these things, because it's all going to go into your consciousness. And everything that's in your consciousness, it's what shows up in your journeys. And this is the same for any other psychedelic, but especially with ayahuasca, it's a very strong medicine, very profound experiences. Everyone experiences it so differently that it's almost impossible to describe or talk about. It's a long journey. The way that we do it, we start around sunset. I know traditionally they start around 10 p.m. So that's a little late. I'm like, I like the earlier one. I like starting at 5 p.m. and then going to bed at 12. So, but the traditional way is they do start at 10 p.m. and then you go all night and you don't sleep. I like the way we do it. We start early, so you have a long journey and you're able to fall asleep after. Some people don't fall asleep and they still continue till the morning. So everyone is really different. You may have 1 cup, 2 or 3 cups. There's different types of ayahuasca. So there's different types of brews, different types of strengths, just like any different types of strains. So yeah, the preparation is pretty simple. Even that itself can bring a lot up for people. No salt, nothing spicy. For some dietas, they say no meat. For some, they're okay with meat. So every ceremony is different. Every facilitator, shaman is different. And yeah, and the fasting before the day of ayahuasca, it's recommended to fast, but before that, you don't need to fast, and it's probably better to not fast so you have energy and you're able to really have the strength and energy to sit in ceremony, because it's a lot of energy. Because if you're purging, it's a lot of energy that's happening. It's like a workout. So yeah, it's definitely recommended to fast the day of ayahuasca. And yeah, and even after, it's recommended for 2 to 3 days after your ayahuasca ceremony to continue the dieta. I don't know if I ever have, but it's recommended. And yeah, so that's kind of the preparation. And for myself personally, my first ceremony was 2 years ago. I'll never forget it. It was one of the most life-changing ceremonies of my life. It was freaking terrifying, but it was something that I was ready for. So most people do not get this first introduction with Aya to be really intense. Most people will have like a nice, loving, really soft introduction. The medicine, like she quite literally communicates with you the entire time. You will hear her voice, you will hear her spirit, you will feel her. And sometimes, our transcended ancestors will come through as well to hold us and care for us during the ceremony. So it's very ancestral. But for my first one, I was ready to just go in. So it was very dark for the first maybe 40 minutes, but you don't really feel time when you're in it. I was told after it was only 40 minutes. I'm like, that felt like hours. I was in there I was in a void. I don't know. Oh my goodness. But when I was complete, like I was holding my friend's hand the whole time, who was facilitating the ceremony. I'm like, he's like, you're fine, you're here. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm not here. Yeah. But when I was complete, when I was done my purging process, and this is why it's important. You don't have to physically purge, but it is recommended if you feel heavy in your stomach and you feel like dark and you just don't feel good. And if you don't feel good on medicine, you have to do something different. Something has to shift. Something has to be alchemized. And for me, it was purging. I was like, okay, I got to purge this out. And when I was complete with purging, I felt it was the first time, and probably to this day, the only time in my life where I felt peace. And it was like this peace and joy and gratitude and happiness that wasn't like a lot of adrenaline, really excited. It was just like, I was looking around and I could just be, and I was in a group ceremony. There was like maybe 10, 15 people there. And I was done. Like I had my ceremony. I was done so quickly. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing everyone in their process. And I'm like, this is so beautiful. And it was outdoors. So I got to walk outside and I'm still on the medicine and I can see everything. Like it's like mushrooms, but different. Like I could see energy. Like, oh, it was just the most beautiful thing in the world. And that was my first ceremony. And I've sat with her about 3 times, I think. 3 big ceremonies. Yeah.
What do you think is happening during that? Whether it's that or mushrooms or other things, like it's pretty clear that something is going on. My hypothesis is that there's a lot of dimensions around us that we just can't see. If you even just look at the electromagnetic spectrum, we a visible light is this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one type of energy, right? There could be, who knows how many types.
Yeah.
And I think that in order for us to exist in this plane and not have our minds explode,
Mm-hmm.
our brains have been basically programmed to filter out everything but a very, very tiny slice of what you need to survive. Yeah. And it seems like the medicine sort of takes the governor off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, here, take a look around.
Yes. Yeah. The way I love to describe it is it removes the illusion, because everything we see in the third dimension, this third density, this is more illusion based than anything else. Because when we are on medicine, we are actually seeing what is real, like what is physically real. Everything that we're seeing visually, the plants moving, that's what's really happening. In the third density, our brain, there's a percentage, this has been a scientific, a researcher statistic, something that said we are only using a certain percent of our brain, a very small percent of a part of our brain. And when we're on medicine, we're using 50% more, 60% more. So it's really what medicine does is it allows our brain to be more active. It allows our heart to be more open. Our heart is another brain. And we see the truth. We see the real reality that is present to us. So, yeah.
I saw the movie The Matrix when it came out, and I was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the first time I saw it, how I was just like, whoa, this is so wild. And it wasn't until this awakening in the last couple of years, because I'm 40 now, so when it came out it was probably over 20 years ago. It was like, oh, this is a metaphor. Oh, I just woke up out of the Matrix. And it's really difficult to realize, because I've had a really challenging, let's call it, last 9 months. I've been on this journey now for about 3 years-ish. And it was so beautiful and so profound and so much going on and such growth and healing and yada, yada. And then I hit this sort of like recursive moment. And there's periods where you're like, just plug me back in. Just let me forget. Just let me go back to sleep. Right. And it's so funny because in that movie, that guy chooses to do that. Right. And he's sitting there and he's eating his steak. And it's just wild, this idea that there's an entire set of planes for which absolutely we I don't know how you can't know. Once you've woken up, how you can't know that they exist. Yeah. And yet, the trick is, I don't want to say to not care, but like you can't just obsess over that. Because if you try and live in this 5D world, you blow up your 3D world. And that's a really interesting dichotomy. And it's non-obvious. Because as soon as you wake up, you're like, cool. Well, everybody, you're coming with me too, first of all, right? Like obviously,
everyone has to wake up now.
And obviously we got to just go be in samadhi and just like merge with the universe, because like none of this matters. And so whatever. And it's just like crashing into walls for months trying to figure out, oh, that's all true, but it doesn't even have to matter, because all that matters is that I'm at peace and I'm able to be present in the moment, in flow state, with love, with whatever's in front of me on this plane. Because I didn't come to this plane to be in that plane. I'll be there soon enough.
I love that.
I think that's one of the interesting things about psychonauts is I think people can get addicted to that escape to what is ultimately a higher reality.
And I think it comes down to when you describe it, it's also creating another separation, because you're saying this is outside of me. I'm in the third density. I'm in the third dimension, and the fifth dimension's over there. And this is where this is also another trap in a way, because it's not over there. The dimensions aren't outside of you.
Right.
And this
We
is
are
the,
all of them.
we
all the
are
time.
all of it. Exactly. And these are just, dimensions are just densities. They're just frequencies. Every time I operate in a frequency of fear, I am dropped down to the densest dimension there is, right? The densest timeline there is. So when we talk about, or when I talk about dimensions and densities and frequencies, it's just about what is the vibration that you want to be at. And there's no right or wrong. Like, it's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to suffer. And it's okay, am I going to step back up and align with my highest frequency, my highest timeline, whatever that is for me? And it's important that, yeah, we don't fall into that trap of everyone has to be 5D and everyone has to be love and light. It's like, without the darkness, there would be no light. Without the light, there would be no darkness. So we have to embrace all of it. And when we have any judgment for something that just is, it's a resistance of self, because everything is me. So it all comes back to that concept and that understanding, and it's just frequency. So whenever I operate in love and light and peace, I'm at a higher frequency, I'm in a higher dimension. So it's kind of simple. And I understand, like, you know, there's the idea that there's other worlds and there's just so much, there's so much in this universe, you cannot even comprehend it with your brain. And that's also part of this journey, is just to continue to discover, but also stay grounded. Like, the most important thing, and this is a lot of my students who come to me, they are very powerful people, like more third eye open than I am, like more, like they're very much up there. They're very up in the higher dimensions and the higher frequencies. And I'm very much on earth. Like I'm pretty grounded. I can be pretty grounded. I'm chilling. And so my students who come to me who are like up here, I'm like, I'm going to bring you back to earth. Like, this is amazing. You have all these superpowers. They're really psychic. They can see timelines. They can see everything. But the problem is they're not grounded. So it's like they're walking around unstable and unable to live their earth life. So I feel my calling, and this is just what I feel intuitively has been given to me, I didn't really choose this, is I allow people to be, I'm kind of like the bridge for people from 3D to 5D. Like, I'm that bridge to support people in their transition to a higher frequency lifestyle while still remaining on earth. I feel like that's been my role in this game so far. So
I had a breakfast with my first spiritual mentor, who was the CEO of a software company that I used to work at. And he was a recovering alcoholic turned Buddhist. Wow. Irish guy, of all things.
Amazing.
And it was a few months ago. I was having breakfast with him, and I was talking about sort of how challenging this time has been for me. And particularly around, like, once you realize you are a piece of God and that this is all just like this infinite replunging of things, it's easy for there to be like a nihilism to set in of like, so like, what's the point? Like, if it's all infinity and there's infinite timelines and infinite me's, and it's just like that, then nothing matters. And he said something to me that just immediately brought tears to my eyes, because it, you know how when you hear something, it's like a gong resonating, and you just feel it throughout you. And he said, the point of life is to live. And it sounds so simple, and it might sound really like contrived to people who aren't anywhere on the path or aren't, you know, up against something. But when you're floating away, it's easy to forget that, like, whatever this is, the reason it appears to be is to be, not to escape and not to ascend, you know, up into the heavens. It's like, no, it's to be here now.
Yeah, we're here to experience.
It's beautiful that you are helping people on that part of their journey, because someone's got to do it. And, you know, the number of people who are on this part of the path is a small number of people. The number of people who could help tether you when you're on that path is a markedly smaller number, right? So you are a rare gem. And so I'm glad to hear that you're working on that stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
What are some of the things that have happened um, since you've been on this business part of your journey that maybe you didn't expect, good, bad, or indifferent? Like, what's some crazy stories?
I mean, I started my business ventures when I was really young, like 16, 15. I started really branching out and doing so many different business things. And it
This is
was
beyond the
really
YouTube channel.
beyond YouTube, and it was involved in YouTube as well. I was getting paid to make videos for different companies, and I was doing all these gigs and stuff like that. I can't think of the word right now. And yeah, I always wanted to like really start my own business. And I think, oh God, I'm trying to remember. I think I was 16 when I started one of my own workshops. Like it was my first workshop I was doing. I wanted to do it for teenagers because I loved doing self-development stuff for teens. And it was really hard for a few years until I moved to Costa Rica. I also had my own counseling business before I moved to Costa Rica. So I had clients online. I had a few clients, but nothing was ever like so clear and so grounded for me. It was like, I have all these businesses. I'm doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not hitting my goals. I'm not creating enough abundance. And I was still suffering and I was still struggling. And when I moved to Costa Rica, I think it was truly the Costa Rica environment that allowed me to have so much clarity and so much grounding, because first what needed to happen was I needed to ground and heal my nervous system. I thought I was healed. Like I thought I was good, and I'm just suffering because it's the system, because it's life, blaming things outside of me. And of course, living in the city is very dense and it's very challenging. I would never choose to live here long term. It's, for me personally, I feel I'm a very sensitive person. I'm very sensitive to energy, and I feel because this has been my calling, I have to be very aware of where I put myself in what environment. So because I'm easily influenced by energy. So when I moved to Costa Rica, it was so clear. I knew I wanted to do retreats since I was 16. I'm like, I'm going to have my own retreats one day. I'm going to have my own classes. It was very clear. I just didn't know how to do it, how it was going to happen, how it was going to come about, how am I going to make this work and make this my life. And when I got to Costa Rica, it was just so clear. It was just like, you do this and do this and do that and do that. And honestly, it was so easy. Like, it wasn't easy. No, let me take that back. It was very simple. Leading up to it, I will never forget, I mean, it's funny, I'm kind of forgetting now, but I remember when I was about to, because I was running a whole property for a year by myself. And before I stepped foot into that property, before I was about to take it over and manage like a whole freaking property with like 4 cabinas and my own house. And like, it was a big property, and I've never done anything like this before. I remember the months leading up to it, like maybe 1 month or 2 months before, I was having so many doubts. I was like, there's no way I'm doing this. I can't do this. So what I literally did was I sat with mushrooms. I had a little, like a very microdose, like kind of like a microdose. And I just sat and I felt everything that my ego, my lower self, my lower frequency self wanted to feel, of like, you're not doing this. You can't do this. It's not happening. Who are you to do this? And I went in it. I went so dark so I could just cry and let it out and literally allow myself to feel like, this isn't for me. I'm not going to do this. And after I let myself feel that and go through that, I was so at peace. I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I can do this. And it was just, I had to allow myself to go through the flows of that emotion and not resist it. I didn't want to suppress it. My body didn't want to suppress it. And it was just the old subconscious programming, the limiting belief saying, I'm not worthy of this. I'm probably the first person in my family who has like a self-employed business, so there's so much of this stuff coming up saying you are not capable of this. And yeah, so like a little bit of mushrooms and I was good to go. Like mushrooms has always been my go-to if I ever feel something really, really dense in my body that wants to be released. I will sit with mushrooms and I'll intentionally make it a ceremony for myself to heal this part of me. And yeah, I remember when I first started, the first month or two, I was having like some personal life challenges, like in relationships. So that was playing a factor in how I was showing up with my business and my work. Other than that, as soon as I got that out of the way, which I think was another beautiful test and opportunity to go through some challenges in relationships while I'm starting my business for the first time, I'm like, are you kidding? Of course. And then once that passed and I got to go through through that, everything was so smooth. It was just rolling in very, very simply and very smoothly. And this is why because of this experience, I know without a doubt, if something is for you, it will happen. It will happen. Maybe there'll be a little bit of resistance. It will be a little bit uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be so uncomfortable to the point where you're physically unable to do it. Because if something is for you, you are able to do it. It will light you up. You will wake up every morning and be doing it. I sit 10 hours on my computer sometimes a day, just responding to emails and doing calls because I know I love this. If it was for something else, I would hate it. I hated working 9 to 5s, you know? So if it's your path, if it's your calling, and it doesn't feel like a job to me, like more than anything, it's just what I love more than anything. So, yeah.
Has there been anybody or any like awkwardness, like people showing up and being like off the reservation? You're like, you can't be here.
No, never. No, everyone who has been a part of it, has been so beautiful. Yeah, there hasn't been a single one.
And do you screen that energetically when you're meeting people that you're sort of exiting them out of the system before? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I have an application process. We go through an interview process. Yeah. Very aware of who I choose.
I was going to say, it seems almost impossible that there's not somebody who's, a little,
yeah. And I truly, like, I believe in spirit. I believe I'm so protected that I know if there is ever someone who's not supposed to be in my physical reality, that God, whatever spirit, will make it happen, that doesn't show up into my reality. So that's why I've been really, I don't want to say lucky. It's been my path. I truly, like, every day I say I'm in my highest timeline. Everything is happening for me. So if anything does happen where there's some challenges with my guests or something is just not clicking with us, it gets figured out. Like it's a learning opportunity for me and for that person as well. So there's definitely been some things I've learned. I've had some interesting people for sure at some points, but nothing that I would say like, oh, I would never have someone like that again. No.
You mentioned what sounds like might be either mantras or prayers. Is there anything that you start or end your day with?
Yeah, I don't have any specific like rituals and stuff. I remember that was something that used to really stress me out in my old life. It was like, I need a morning routine and I need a night routine and I need this routine and I need scheduling. And as soon as I let all of that go, everything again was happening in flow. So I don't have a specific routine. I like to just, quiet down at the end of the night and, just relax in any way. And that's really just resting and like hanging out with my cats. So there's nothing really specific, One thing I love to do every morning is take a shower. Like first thing before I check my phone, before anything, I take a shower. Water for me is a really important element that helps me heal and purify and cleanse. And now it's actually become a ritual automatically. I wasn't planning it, but every time I finish my shower, I will thank the water. I will give a prayer to the water and I say thank you. And I also claim what I want a timeline to step into, because water, when you're in water, you enter portals and you're able to enter timelines a lot quicker using the water element. So I will claim what timeline I want to enter and then like go under the water, like, how people get baptized, basically. It's the same thing. It's a ritual. So I will claim the timeline I want to enter and then I go under the water and I say thank you and I do a prayer and then I finish my shower. So that's been a little ritual for me every rising. So and it's been working.
Claiming timelines in water.
Yeah.
Is, we're not going to skip past that.
Yeah, water is, I don't even describe water. Water is everything. Water is life and water is alive. Like everything, every element is alive. Water is very much alive. When we're 80% water, when we speak to ourselves, there was that Dr. Emoto who did the study of water using affirmations. I don't know if you've heard of him before. And you looked at the structure of the crystals of those waters, and the ones that had bad affirmations looked ugly and like not pretty designs or shapes or symbols. And the ones with good affirmations on them, positive, happy, beautiful, they looked like beautiful snowflakes. It's absolutely amazing. You have to look into this. And yeah, so that's how I know, and just from experience working with water, that it very much responds to what I speak. And because we are God, again, like that, we are the creator of our reality. This is my main thing. It's like, I am the creator of my reality. This is my main teaching that I offer, is that you are the creator of your reality. You can claim any timeline in any moment. And the tools we have around us are tools that allow us to assist us.
So when you say claim any timeline, what I hear to bring the Western component to it, or the physics component to it, is that there's basically, at any given moment, there's an infinite number of ways that the universe could progress. And technically, they all exist.
Yes.
But we're only experiencing one of them at a time.
That we're aware of.
That we're aware of.
Because technically we're experiencing
some, is picking up on. And at the quantum level, there are these experiments that demonstrate nothing exists until you observe it. So are you familiar with the double slit experiment?
No.
I'll put it in the show notes for folks.
Okay.
So this is something that's been empirically proven. They've run this experiment hundreds of times, possibly thousands of times. It's absolutely unequivocally proven. You take a piece of metal and you put two slits in it, and you fire either photons or electrons, whatever, at it. And then there's something on the back that is radiated by the subatomic particles that come through. If you're looking at it, if you look at it, what will happen is it will create two stripes on the thing that's on the back of the that's receiving the particles.
Yeah.
If there's no one there, if you run the experiment, no one's in the room, no one looks at it, there's no attention given to it, it creates this pattern of interference across the entire back, as if what was going through was waves instead of particles, aka possibilities instead of definite outcomes.
Yeah.
So what that, I think, is sort of empirically proving is that nothing is real in our timeline until we put our attention on it. And I think that that's where manifesting can come into play, where it's like literally on a quantum level, you're rearranging the whole universe to slightly shuffle in the direction of what it is that you are trying to bring about into existence. Now, what's interesting about what you're describing on the water, and I never thought about that, is does the substrate, the medium that you're in, while you're doing that focus and concentration, does that matter? It certainly seems like it might. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And it's also easier to vibrate things when you're in water, right?
Yes.
Sound travels a lot better through water than it does through air.
Yeah.
And if everything is vibration and you're trying to vibrate something out, anyway, it's a long diatribe on
No, I love that. I think I did hear about that experiment in one of these spiritual movies. Maybe it was What the Bleep Do We Know? I think it was in that one. Yeah, it's a good movie.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what are you learning now? Like, what are you focused on? What are the new frontiers for yourself as you grow? What's curious too?
For me, I mean, the past 3 weeks, the past month has been a very breakthrough, groundbreaking time in my life. A lot happened in the last month. My audience is aware of a lot of changes happened in my life. People I was involved with and understandings of the spiritual concepts I was taught by different mentors. And so this past month has really been a lot of inner work for myself and navigating where my life is taking me now, because I feel, I'm in Canada right now, which is something I was planning on doing for a while. I wanted to come back and visit and work on some creative projects. And yeah, something my path just also took me on was music. So music is, you know, one of the
I feel
greatest
like I saw a clip
tools.
of you singing and it sounded very
Yeah.
beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, music has been one of my biggest callings since, you know, since I was a small child. And I truly believe, like, with my whole heart, the reason I'm starting now in music, and like I've written songs before over the years, and I've played with recording music before, but it was never something I was able to move forward with fully or have full trust in myself in. And I feel like where I am in my spiritual path and journey has really built up this confidence and this peace. So, and also this frequency of peace and love in my vessel, in my body, so that when I am recording music now, and that is the frequency that I'm emitting. So I want to
Mm.
make healing music. I want to make medicine music, music that is inspiring and just healing, truly, like a lot of love in it. And I really feel that's where my path is taking me. So I'm in this really fun, exciting, not really sure where my year is taking me. I'm traveling, I'm doing different things and trying different creative projects and taking dance classes again, and just living my life. And I feel this past month, I keep telling everybody this, I'm like, I feel so human for the first time in 2 years. And, you know, 2 years
Mm.
being in Costa Rica, I was very much in this world I created for myself, which absolutely had to happen. You know, there was this trend going on TikTok that was like, be delusional. And it's like, absolutely be delusional. And I still very much believe in that. It's like, all this reality is an illusion anyway. So obviously create it to what you want it to be. But I was so into this high frequency everything to the point where because I was also working so hard on my business, I didn't have a lot of time to be with myself or have relationships with people. Like I didn't have strong relationships with people. I was very much by myself the entire time, which I don't have any regrets about. Like I love being by myself. I'm totally okay with that now. And I've made peace with it. And that was also necessary for me because I was a very codependent type of person in my past. So it
Mm.
was necessary for me to be alone for almost 2 years and to really be with myself and create this self-love so that I'm able to go out back into my life, be human again, and do all these different things, challenge myself again. Music is like a whole new world for me. So it's going to be challenging. I'm going to get stressed out. I'm going to get pissed off. I'm going to get, you know, all these emotions that a human experiences. I'm going to experience it. But now I know how to respond to it. And this is what I tell people. I'm like, yes, we can heal our traumas. Yes, we can heal and we can be better and we can achieve feeling peace. But again, like you said, that doesn't mean the suffering is going to go away. It doesn't mean I'm not going to ever feel hurt again, but I am better at responding to it. So for me in my old life, when I suffered. Like I go into it and I never get out because it's so comfortable for me. It was my comfort zone to be suffering and being depressed. Nothing
Mm.
else made sense for me because that was my world. So for me now, whenever I feel depression experiencing in my vessel, again, I'm the observer of this vessel, of this avatar. I'm not this avatar. When I observe depression coming up, when I observe hurt and stress coming up, I observe it. I allow my avatar to feel it. I feel into it. And then I respond with, okay, what is the lesson? What do you need to move? And sometimes it can happen like this. Sometimes it takes a few days, maybe a few weeks. Sometimes we just need to be in like our little nest and hibernate for a little bit, be hermit mode. But for the most part, it's been very quick now. It's like I'm better at responding. That's how we're going to respond because everything is now. Because we have this also illusion of the future and the past, which is a really big part of my journey that has allowed me to gain a lot of peace, not having to worry that there's a future and I have to have a legacy to live up to. It's like, no, I just get to live and be.
That's
So,
beautiful.
yeah.
When you're talking about being alone in that timeline, it also made me think you've got over 100,000 followers on TikTok. That's a non-trivial number. So first of all, congratulations, because that
Thank
doesn't
you.
happen by accident.
Thank you.
How did you manage, or do you manage, the relationship between you've got like 5D, 3D, and then like our fake worlds that we create as humans, right? How do you manage that being more human in the present and not get pulled face first into the fame trap or the,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's been a question I have constantly been asking myself ever since I started recording music back in October, was when I started recording. And that was the question I kept coming up with. It's like, is this for my ego? Like, do I
Mm,
have to do this? Do I really need to make music? Because it's always been something at the back of my mind. I'm like, I want this more than anything. I just
mm,
want to sing. And I sit with it, and I've even sat with it with mushrooms too, questioning it. Like, who is this identity that Derya wants to be a singer? Like, what is this about? And yeah, and I go through those timelines and those questions of, is this for my ego, and how do I do this without operating from my ego? And the truth is, we cannot kill our ego. If we did, we wouldn't exist. This is how we have different human beings. It's because of ego. So ego is a beautiful thing, and I think this is a big part of also a big like spiritual trap, is people think that we're not supposed to have an ego, and it's like, if you didn't have an ego, you wouldn't have a personality. You wouldn't
right.
have things that are unique about you that's unique to any single other person on this planet. So ego is beautiful. And I've learned to sit with that, and with my music career, to look at that as like, I'm going to be okay regardless of how this goes. And I'm totally in complete surrender if that, I don't get successful doing music. Like, I'm going to be okay, because this is a thing, even with my business now, I haven't attached to it as an ego thing. This has
Mm.
been a really big thing for me the last month, of just sitting with. And I've had many opportunities to sit with this idea of like, if I did nothing, if I had no service to offer, who would I be? Would I still be worthy? Just to exist, just to be? And that's a big question I love to ask people, because it's really true. We attach our identity and our ego to everything we do, our business, our work. But it's like, what if you just didn't do anything? What if you
Mhm.
just existed like a little tree and just was
Human
there?
beings, not human
Yeah,
doings.
exactly. So I was able to process that with doing music, and really just sit with, I'm just going to do it from my heart, and I'm not going to rush it, and I'm not going to force something that's not supposed to happen. And yeah, that's pretty much how I go about it. And I really feel it's like the medicine path that's calling me. And I also feel it's very ancestrally healing for me as well, because I really want to explore creating music in my mother tongue, in Kurdish. And that's something more than anything is really calling me towards. So playing with different instruments, and learning, and music is a beautiful tool for healing. I really believe this. So for me, I see myself, I already incorporate sound healing in my retreats and with my clients and everything I do. So it's just an added bonus to it. It's like creating music or just being in singing circles. And that's really, really healing for people to open up their throat chakra.
You mentioned your mother tongue. Have you done any exploration into Islam and its connections or lack thereof to your current practices?
Well, Islam is a religion, so I don't have any affiliation with Islam because I'm Kurdish. So culture and religion is different, right?
You mentioned earlier that your motherland, the place you came from,
Uh-huh.
everybody's sort of forced into it,
Forced into it, yes. But
right?
traditionally, and when you go back ancestrally, Kurds were never Muslim. They were forced to become Muslim. And it
Oh,
was something that was conditioned. So originally Kurds were never Muslim. I think there's so many ancient religions that are actually super beautiful that I have looked into. But originally
what
Kurds
was
were not.
the Kurdish?
There's a few different ones. There's Yarsanism. They're very ancient, so most people don't know what these are. I think Sufism could be one of them. There was Yazdiism, which is something that is still, it's a minority, but some people may know it because there's a lot of abuse happening towards that group, the Yazdis. And that's been a religion, not even a religion. It's more like a cultural ethno-religion. It's a religious that you have to be born into. You cannot choose to be Yazdi or Ezdi. But it's been something that I've been looking into a little bit because there's something that is connected to the Kurdish history that I feel it's connected to Ezdis, because some people consider Ezdis to be Kurdish. Some people consider them to be their own heritage, their own ancestral line. And I feel like there's a lot of information there. And I know once I tap more into my own Kurdish heritage, and like tapping more into just singing in the language. I feel information will come to me over the years, and especially as I grow older, for sure. And I visit the lands. I feel really called to visit the lands, and I'm sure I'm going to get some downloads there about that. But for Yezdis, for example, like they worship the sun. And when I heard, I'm like, of course, I'm like, this makes so much sense. So there's a lot of spirituality in ancient religions. Has a lot of connections. So Islam originally was never for Kurds, if that makes sense, or it was conditioned upon them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And a lot of Iranians as well. Most Iranians do not want to be Muslim, I feel. At least most Iranians that I do meet, Persians, different ethnic groups throughout Iran. But yeah.
They're sort of trapped into it at birth.
Yeah, it's a conditioned thing, and some people choose to continue, some people don't. I don't have much knowledge about Islam. So, yeah.
I've been very curious as I've been going on this journey to see these subtle, or not so subtle in many instances, intersection between Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam. And then behind all of that is all of the ancient religions, right? The pagans. And you realize it just seems like it's all just a reinterpretation of the same, like, originally somebody woke up and started writing stuff down. And everything else is sort of a reinterpretation of that over and over and over. We make it more and more complicated with more and more words. But I think it's all kind of saying the same thing.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. There's so much truth.
Beautiful in that. It's just, how do we stop hurting each other and consequently hurting ourselves with this literal interpretation and this like clinging to othering other people, right? It's, oh, you don't believe what I believe in the exact words and the exact way that I believe it, and therefore you are going to hell, or you are, the worst, and therefore you must be persecuted. Which is ironically the opposite of what I think every religion technically says at its core. Anyway, that's
it's very true. There's so much truth in religious texts, and the only thing is just been manipulated into different ways and different understandings by human beings. So yeah, when you do connect into understanding what God is, you understand everything about religion and why that system was created in the first place as well.
Do you ever look into any of the indigenous spiritual histories, like those of, we'll call them Native Americans, meaning all of the Americas? Because I find that stuff to be also very interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Canada, so I'm very aware of, what happens here. Yeah, because it's to the indigenous. And it's because, this was the information I received. The reason the indigenous are attacked time and time again is because they have all the truths. They hold the most truth and the most wisdom and more melanin than anybody else. And it's all connected. There's no accidents of why people choose specific things. And it's the same for indigenous Kurdish people as well. We are the biggest indigenous group in the world without our own state, without our own land. So there is a lot for me. And I sit with that too. I'm like, why would my soul choose to be Kurdish? I'm like, this is interesting, and I'm sitting with that information. It's like Kurds have a lot of information in their DNA, in their vessel, that is the reason they are targeted time and time again. So it's the same for the Native Americans throughout North America as well.
There's a HBO series called Exterminate All the Brutes. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's powerful, devastating, and fascinating. And it basically tracks how, we'll call them European colonials, really it was Christians, decided that everybody needed to be Christian or die. And they went around the entire planet and exterminated anybody who could commune with the cosmos.
Wow.
And I think what's really interesting is if you think about the element of control and judgment, like all the masculinity related to that, and you play that out long enough and you burn all the witches at the stake, right? And anytime somebody shows divine feminine power, it's cut out from underneath them, or they're exterminated, literally. Let's think about Native Americans. Like, they had the ability to get by on the land and commune with nature in a way that we simply did not understand. And so we decided to kill them all.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward into modern times, and all of a sudden we have a toxic masculinity problem. And it's like, well, maybe that was a crazy runaway downstream effect of eliminating the sacred divine from millennia.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it's beautiful that folks like yourself and others like you are helping to publicize the beauty of this ancient knowledge at a time when it is so desperately needed.
Yeah.
Because people are sick, really sick, both physically, mentally, spiritually, like all of the sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing I've been particularly impressed with in your work is your bravery in terms of you really put yourself out there in your content.
Yeah.
Like, there's a couple of things I'm thinking of. Like, there's one YouTube video where you're putting on an atypical mask, for instance, and it's just like, that is just fucking bold. And then it's not just the fact that you do it; you're vocalizing, "I'm terrified right now." Right? Like, that's real authenticity, and the world needs that. So, thank you for being you.
Thank you. I appreciate that acknowledgement. Thank you. Yeah, that was a big one. that was pretty life-changing when I did that and I posted that for the first time. Yeah.
Where do you think you get that courage?
Courage. Oof. From every moment that I was a small child and I was too afraid to use my voice. That I was the shyest kid growing up. I was the quietest kid growing up. I was so afraid to even say one word in front of a group of people. So I do it for that small girl, that small child who was always terrified, and always cared what people thought. So yeah, it just went into this thing, and making my first YouTube channel was what allowed me to really get out of my comfort zone and push myself. I remember being 15 and made 3 YouTube channels, and that I kept deleting them because I was so scared. And finally I was like, I'm going to do this. I don't care how scared I am. I don't care how ugly I think I look. I don't care how I hate how my voice sounds. Like, it was horrible when I first started out. It was very, very challenging, but I knew I was going to get through it. I knew I was going to get to the other side, and I was going to feel good, and I was going to get better at my work. And that was it. And that was my first proof and evidence I had that I can get good at something. It's a skill, just like anything else. So even courage itself, it's like a skill. You just have to practice it. And it's almost like fake it till you make it. That's really what it is. I could easily, if I wanted to, retreat back into my old ways and be in bed all day and be, just not living my best life. I could do that because it's comfortable and it's easy. Or I can create a peaceful life with myself so I don't even have to even imagine going back to my old life. And that's what I've allowed myself to create now. So it's just giving yourself enough evidence, take action. More than anything, that's the most important thing. You have to take action. People think they can just sit there and manifest and meditate. And it's like, okay, you can do that. And sure, maybe 1 or 2 things will pop up for you, but you have to take action at the opportunities that present itself, or create the opportunities. So yeah, courage is fear, and feeling that fear and doing it anyways. And also recognizing that fear is also an illusion. This has really helped me in everything that I do now. It's like fear, it's an illusion. It just doesn't exist. So
You mentioned much earlier on that you, in the last 2 years, feel like you finally put a capstone on, I can't remember whether it was the ancestral trauma or
Mm.
there's a piece that you feel like you just sort of conquered. What was it
Mm.
that happened that allowed you to do that?
It was this piece of, how do I describe this? So what happened that I can talk about is, so in the last, I think it was in December, I announced, yeah, I'll just say what I have been putting out online. So in December, I announced that I was going to be partnering up with a business partner, and we were going to do retreats together. We were going to do everything together, and it was really exciting for us. And this person was someone I considered my family, someone I really love and I trust, and I still love her, and I still wish her the best more than anything. And what happened was last month, things changed. So we
Mm.
are no longer business partners. And that was, and more so just outside the business aspect, it was very personal. Like, we're not in contact at this moment right now. I'm taking some space from her and from just that world. So, and this was someone who I met for the first time when I was in Costa Rica. So she was someone who I was living at her place for 4 months. So she was really this mentor for me, this person who I looked up to. And so she was someone I knew for the entirety of the 2 years in Costa Rica. And there was always this gut feeling, like there's this like piece that something is not clicking for me. Something's not resonating. I had to take a break from her for like 6 months before. So there was like a lot of things happening in the background that people were not aware of. And so basically in the last month, parting ways and realizing someone, this is what it was. She was like the final person I gave my power away to. She was the final person because she was my mentor. She was my business partner, and I loved her, and she was older than me. So she was like a big sister to me. And I looked up to her. I idolized her. I praised her. And I realized that was another reoccurring pattern. It was very karmic for me because I've had this pattern when I was younger. But she was like that final person. So it was really full circle for me because growing up 8 years in seminars and stuff, it was the same pattern. I would look up to people and I would praise them and idolize them, thinking that there's some guru when they're not. So she was like that final one where it's like, I'm not going to give away my power to anyone anymore. Like, and it was a really big message for me of, why is it that I feel like I need someone external of me to believe in myself? It's like I needed her for validation. Like, look at me, I'm doing this now. Like, look at me. Or can you help me with this? Can you give me advice on this? And yeah, like, it's good to talk to your friends and talk to people you love and get advice and all that. But it was this,
There's a need versus a want.
yeah, exactly. And it was almost this hierarchy between us that also never resonated with me. I didn't understand why there was always a hierarchy. And so it was my final piece of reclaiming my power back for probably the first time in my entire life, like completely. So I feel like this wholeness inside myself. And I was also preparing me. Like I said, I had 6 months where I didn't see her or talk to her. So that really prepared me for where I am now. So this is why I'm very at peace with it. But that was the piece. It was like loving myself so much, not giving away my power, and trusting my intuition. Like, that was a really big part, like really trusting my intuition, because it was speaking to me the whole time. But I was like, it's okay. We're going to make this work. It's all going to work out.
Well, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment, and I'm sure it'll pay a lot of dividends over time.
Thank you.
And I'm sure it also hurt. So I'm sorry
Yeah.
for the hurt that it surely caused, but that's part of the tapestry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that was a big part of it. It was like allowing myself to feel hurt that I didn't allow myself for 2 years, because hurt is low frequency and I'm not supposed to feel low frequency emotions. And that was a big thing that was being like, said to my ear. So that was a big part of this last month of like really unlearning things that don't resonate with me and are not part of my mission and my sharing and my knowledge, and acknowledging some parts in my teachings where I mimicked that, and not to like blame anyone. It was absolutely 100% my responsibility. But where I did mimic that energy to my students, and I'm like, oh, when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, that's gross. I don't ever want to be like that with somebody where I shame them and that's not like I was purposely shaming them, but it sounds like you're shaming and judging someone when you're saying you're not supposed to feel this, or get over this, or you can move on. And it was like almost this toxic positivity. It was very subtle. I was very aware that I didn't want to do that with my students, but it was showing up, and I had to acknowledge that for myself. And I think that's where a lot of the anger came up in the last month, where I'm like, I cannot believe this has happening. But I'm like, of course, it's my lesson. I have to acknowledge this and move forward.
Lessons don't come in the form of pleasantries.
No, definitely not. This has been the most interesting month in a while.
So for folks who are, not totally on the path, or haven't hit rock bottom, or but they're feeling out of sorts, that something in them is vibrating differently than they think it should, and they want to start to explore things other than jumping on a plane and going to Costa Rica for 3 months and doing a bunch of plants, which I also highly recommend. Having not even done it, I would also highly recommend it. But like, what are some things that you might recommend people do to start to explore their awareness and give themselves space to start to heal and wake up a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the first thing that does come up is travel, because travel allows us to have different awarenesses of ourselves. We get to experience ourselves in a new way. So that allows us to open up our consciousness to understand, like, oh, there really is more than my little bubble. Yeah, exactly. You get to get out of the habits. So it can be challenging when you're living in the same environment for so many years and stuff. But it's really just doing what you feel called in the moment. It's hard to say, like, I can say, go meditate, go do yoga, do all these things, but it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter how much external things you do. It's truly about feeling into your heart in the present moment. What feels good right now? What is it that my heart's calling towards? And this is the thing with shadow work and healing. You can, have a therapist and like sit and like do sessions and talk about your trauma. But if it's not something like present, that it doesn't make sense to even talk about anymore, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
Because this was me for like so many years. I was in therapy, just saying the same stuff.
Archaeologist.
Yeah, I was just saying the same stuff again and again. I was just in this loop. So it's like, that doesn't really work. So it's really, healing is about choosing the healthiest choices I can make in the present moment. That's it. That's what shadow work is. Shadow work is when I'm triggered in the moment, someone says something that pissed me off. Am I going to respond in a unhealthy way, or am I going to breathe? Am I going to take a moment and think about what is the best way I can respond to this in a healthy, communicative manner, taking responsibility? So that's really the greatest shadow work we can do, is just responding to our triggers and owning it, taking responsibility. So the first thing is self-awareness, for anybody who's just starting this path or just, curious about anything, is self-awareness and self-responsibility. Understanding I am the creator of my reality. Okay. And also not allowing the guilt and shame and judgment to come onto yourself. Cause then you're like, oh God, I created this. Oh no. And it's like, and then you start beating yourself up, and that's not going to work. You want to understand that you are the observer of the reality. So you do not have to attach to the emotions that come forth with that. And yeah, just present day to day, making a different choice, making choices that align with my heart and for my highest good. And yeah, self-awareness.
If people want to connect with you, where would you recommend they look you up? Website, Instagram?
Yeah, you can go on my Instagram. It's daya.derya. So DAYA.DERYA. That's my Instagram, and it's also on TikTok as well. There's no dot for my TikTok username, so it's just Daya Derya.
Well, this has been an absolutely beautiful conversation. You're a beautiful human, and you're doing the real work out there. And I really appreciate you for your time and your attention. I know you could have been spending this 90 minutes doing literally anything else in the world. So thank you for this. And I hope we get to do it again in the future. I'd love to stay in touch and see how this journey keeps going for you.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Matt. It's been an honor. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.